When I look at our history, I realize that our history is not negotiable. It's not defined by slavery. It is a profound history, and we need to teach it in honesty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Sorry about the tardiness tonight. Had a lot of computer issues trying to get on here tonight. Internet was kind of acting a little bit crazy too, so please bear with us. I don't know what's going on, but we are here. I am here. Welcome to the Erudition Network. My name is Eddie Phillips. This is the Erudition Network, Black History Interactive that we do each week. I've been having to do them on Saturday due to scheduling and some other issues going on, but I am happy to be here with you tonight again to talk about history, to talk about things that are going on in our current situation and how history affects that. This program, if you are new to it, is dedicated to talking about Black history and history that we don't always get exposed to or may have been explained to us, but not as in depth or touched on as properly. So I wanted tonight to take the time to do that and to get on here with you all tonight and make the time. So we are here. This has been a kind of a hard week for me. I lost my last grandparent, my grandma Donna, and it has been it's been a little difficult dealing with that. She was a great supporter of the program and, just of, my family and all, right? My wife, my kids and everything and anything that we did. And I'm going to really miss my grandma because she was always in my corner and always one of those people who I could talk to. Never felt that there's not anything that I could talk to her about. So it is going to be an adjustment with her not being here. But I know that she is in a better place. I know that she is in a better situation. As you get older, so many things happen. And so I just definitely wanted to bring as I start this show tonight, talk about her. I really do love her and I really will miss her. She is my last grandparent. I lost my grandfather a couple of years ago, my grandmother about 2 years ago. And this is my last grandparent. So it is really, really, really something to adjust to. But I wanted to say that as we started the program because she would creep into the comments every now and again just to let me know she was there and, tell me that she might even just say that she loved you, but she always let me know she was watching and I'm really, really going to miss her. So I wanted to give that tribute to her as we started this program tonight. I really, really, really love talking about history. And if you know me, that's a big thing with me and that history connection. And so tonight, if you looked at the title for this episode, tonight's episode is Fascist or Patriotic. And what we're going to talk about tonight are some of the things that have been going on today, but we're going to talk about it from a historical standpoint, right? We have to look at what's going on. So many people right now are telling us that they're patriotic. There's patriotism. We had the military parade today. And then the question is this real? Is it being hijacked? Are today's military parades, are these shows of force? Are they to unite us as a country, as patriots and people who support America? Or is it something to intimidate us and to push us further into separation or away from each other? And when you see voices rise up in protest, voices of people who don't agree with whatever it is that you're doing, is the idea of tanks and military people marching down the street, whether it is the birthday of the army or whatever, because these things happen every year, but we've never done this, right? So is this a push to reset the idea of what citizenship is? Is this government suppression? Is this political oppression? And so we want to kind of go into that tonight. And I think the best way to ever go into something like that is to approach it from a historical standpoint, right? To go back and look at other times in other places in history where this may have happened before. And so if we can do that, if we can look at the totalitarianism, the authoritarianism, the patriotism, as we call it, and start to peel back that onion. And that's what I want to do tonight. That's what I want to do tonight on the program. I want us to start to kind of look at these things. It is not to insult your political stance and who you are and what you believe and all this. It's for you to have facts and then use those facts to make a properly, educated decision on how these things look and how are they being used. Right. So that's what we're going to go in tonight. Hey, if you're joining us tonight, if you're on a program and you're in the background, please leave comments. We do see your comments. If, however, you're going through Facebook, I'm still seeing some issues with Facebook lately. I'll get off the show and I'll notice that somebody has typed like a whole thing of comments, but it's only on Facebook and I don't see it because Facebook is not, is having problems communicating through StreamYard and how we stream. So if you are making a comment or you're saying something and I'm not seeing it, please go back and do me a favor and try to go to YouTube, our YouTube station. I noticed that we can see it. Like right now, I'm trying to click over, or I'll try to see what I can see every now and again. I'll click over to Facebook. I see Bobby, you had left a comment of condolences. Thank you. I appreciate that, my brother. Thank you very much. But I want you all to have a voice in what we're talking about tonight. I want you to be able to put your opine in, your opinion in, or your thoughts in on what is being said and done. So let's get into this. One of the things that I was looking at earlier today, right, as we start seeing the situation in LA where we see U.S. troops and state militia and National Guard and all these things going on, and how it was being federally directed at first, and there was this fight. And I started to think back to other times in this country where we've used U.S. troops to go in for both good and bad, right? The first thing that always comes to my mind in Black history always will be the draft riots of 1863. In 1863, during the Civil War, mobs, predominantly Irish, went crazy. That's the best way for me to say it. It's probably not a historical term. Historians will probably tell you that they were angry. No, they went crazy because they killed men, women, and children. And this was led by a position where the Irish and the Blacks in New York had been pitted against each other for years, right? As workers and as people who would be used. If you were free black, you would negotiate. The people would fight between whether it was going to be an Irish person taking the job or a Black person taking the job. And they would drop the money down to make both of these groups angry with each other. One time they may hire a Black person for $1.50, and then they'd hire an Irish person for $1.25. And this was a way to keep bringing the price down. And the wealthy and the racist saw this as a way of being cheap, but at the same time, not looking at how this separated and caused this violent powder keg. And during the Civil War, when Irish were coming here as immigrants, they were being pulled to go fight into the Civil War coming off of the boats. And so there was a very big anger between the Irish and the blacks, probably disproportionately Irish against black, right? And so federal troops had to be called in to quell this because there were riots, right? Riots that happened. And it's argued hundreds, I will tell you, of black people were killed, right? They were lynched. They were burned in public. Rich people were killed also. But this was a time in which the troops were sent in during a time of war to come into New York and to quell the violence there. So there is a positive way for you to come in and help, right? And to do things to use the troops properly. And I want to create this duality here because it would be unfair to say we never need federal troops, the National Guard or whatever in our communities. But how we're using it is the problem. Then I would like, let's move a little forward. 1873, I wrote down a couple of things of times where troops were used. The Colfax Massacre, very, very, very important thing that we don't really talk about. 1873 in Louisiana. Black Republicans who wanted to hold political positions after Reconstruction, right? They were attacked by a large group of white supremacists in Louisiana. And they had a whole white paramilitary group of people. I hate to use the word militia, but that's what they were, who came in and they started to fight and kill, right? It allowed for a large amount of mass killing. About 200 black people were killed and slaughtered simply because they wanted to be able to vote and participate in government. And the militia and the group of paramilitary groups that were there, clannish groups who fought off and delayed the federal response, right, is a huge point to look at. They fought off people before the army could actually get in there. And this is important because this is a situation which established the United States versus Cruikshank. And I've talked to you all before about how the United States versus Cruikshank in 1876 was a huge case related to the Colfax Massacre, because it was the time in which the Supreme Court said that murder in the states, right, racial murder, was something that the state would handle, that the federal government had no real ability to get involved with. I'd ask you to go look at United States versus Cruikshank and go look at that case. I've mentioned this many times before so that you can better have an understanding of why these situations are important. This established law. This established the way that the country looked at massacre all the way into the 1970s and the 80s, on how we looked at lynching and murder. It's something for us to consider. Tina, I see you. Thank you for showing us. I don't want us to think that the idea of the military is a bad thing. I am a veteran. I served over 20 some years in the military. I understand the need for our military. But I also understand how we utilize it is important, not only in its effect, but its influence, right? 1876 again, after the United States versus Cruikshank, there was an incident in South Carolina, the Hamburg Massacre, where white militias surrounded and attacked. They have killed a bunch of black people during an Independence Day celebration. Again, this was sanctioned by the state. This was the use of state military troops where they killed people and injured more. But because the country had said it was okay. These were state issues, not federal issues. This madness went on. 1898, North Carolina. Right? We call the Wilmington Coup the only successful coup in the United States, where a multiracial government was violently overthrown. And I'm not going to go too deep into some of these, but troops were used. White militia, supported by government officials, right, went in and killed at least 60 Black people and drove many more out of the city, taking over the government post-Reconstruction. And how we use these National Guard and state militia and how it affects the mentality of people is important. It's important for us to understand this. If we use the military for what they're supposed to be used for, to protect our interests, it's one thing. But when we cloak it in totalitarianism, when we cloak it in fascism, when we cloak it in the idea of one group being greater than the other, then that causes a problem. East St. Louis, 1917, Illinois. White mobs rioted and went crazy on Black people during a simple labor dispute. The Illinois National Guard took its time, by all historical reports, to respond. And we have some cases where the National Guard and the militia, when they came in, they actually didn't stop the rioters. And in some cases, people believe that they participated in the racial violence and riots. Hundreds of Black people, hundreds of people were killed in their neighborhoods and their homes burned down. This was such a bad situation. Such a bad situation that it caused the formation of Black groups to fight against lynching. Most notably, as we look at the situations with the NAACP and how they had to get involved. And so we can look at these military coups, these military actions, right, and see why it happened, why it increased. Because again, we have people who go about this idea of murder, of using the military as a device for murder. It can be something to stop the violence, but often in our history, it has been used as a source of intimidation. The Elaine Massacre in Arkansas, 1919, Red Summer. Black sharecroppers trying to organize into a union, and they were accused of trying to uprise against the state and the government. And over 200 Black men and women and children were killed by estimates. And the governor had to send in troops in order to stop the bloodletting and the massacre that was there. The history of Black people and people of color with the interaction of the military, the National Guard, law enforcement is profound. It is long-reaching. I've given you a couple right now. We haven't even got to, most people talk about Tulsa and the Tulsa Massacre of 1921 in Oklahoma, where they were bombing and blowing people up and hundreds were killed again and communities destroyed. But here's the thing about Tulsa and what the National Guard did. The National Guard stopped people from going into Tulsa. They didn't really engage by all history accounts. What they did is they put blacks in an internment camp outside of the town to make sure that they didn't die. But they didn't really stop the burning, the killing, and the destruction within the town. And these are the historical issues that we face. So when I see the parade of military, my veteran side goes, yes, I'm proud of my brothers. Happy birthday to the Army. But another side of me sees it for what it is and how we utilize the military to quell groups of people and how under orders that they follow. Probably nothing more is an example of that. And I said I was going to spend a lot of time talking about the Detroit race riots of 1943 and the later race riots that took place in Michigan also. Both occasions showed you that when the National Guard and military was put into the cities, a disproportionate amount of Black people, many innocent, were killed, men, women, and children. A couple of years ago, I took a clip from Eyes on the Prize in which it talked about these race riots and how people would go out and say that, you know, the National Guard and military, they turned their guns on me. It was even worse in the late 60s because you had people coming back from Vietnam and crying on the street. Military soldiers, Black military soldiers, we have them documented factually, crying about the fact that they had to turn their guns in the communities in which they're from. And try to stop innocent people from being shot and killed. Buildings burned. Whenever we utilize these types of things, issues happen. The MOVE bombing of 1985 in Philadelphia, where the police in lieu with the military dropped the bomb on the city, killing men, women, and children, Black men, women, and children. The helicopter was supplied by the state. The explosives were provided by the military, and they dropped a C4 explosive onto a community and wiped these people out in 1985. You ask yourself why this is important. We've seen the race riots of the last several years, Ferguson, George Floyd. But when it all comes down to it, there's this issue of people don't have the right to protest. They don't have the right to feel like they have a voice. That's wrong. That's wrong. And that should never be considered something as Americans that we consider to be patriotic. Today, we have people out here who peacefully assembled to protest. But then there's this other part too. These agent provocateurs, these people who come in acting as if they are protesters. And I've talked about this before. They act like they're protesters, and what they really are rabblesers, and there are people who are, some paid, it has been proven in history, some paid, but some who just have an agenda to watch things burn. We saw that during a lot of the racial protests. It was one of the times where I thought BET did a good job because they showed different people's footage of people in Black going and putting bombs and smoke bombs and throwing things and inciting the violence. And people, black folks going, you're not from here. What are you doing? Folks spray painting Black Lives Matter emblems on buildings in order to cause more and more people to be angry. I watched as during those times, I was watching live on CNN where a man, they were beating and trying to get, I guess, the CNN building, and a man handed a guy an explosive device. I know it was an explosive device because if you go back and look at that footage on YouTube, you see him hand it off to him and he walks away. White guy walks away and the black guy throws it into the building. People on both sides, right, who call themselves patriots and rap, but a lot of them have their own agendas. We've lost great people during these uprisings and these horrible situations. And what it comes down to is, how are we as a country? How do we navigate it? You have the right to peacefully assemble and protest. But it always blows my mind that when we do this, there's always the one or two who gets everybody labeled as agitators. And it gives people the excuse to do things, to do violent things to other people. You guys are quiet tonight. There's 6 of you on here. I know you got some questions, some thoughts. Please feel free to drop those thoughts in there. And I will definitely respond. Sorry, I was trying to see if we had any comments on Facebook because, as I said, I can't see all of you all's comments on Facebook. So please, 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 if you can, go to YouTube and we should see it a little bit better. You know, here's the thing. We look at all of this stuff and we say to ourselves that this is America, right? And we shouldn't feel that we are restricted, but we are. But we are. Even when Dr. King, even when they were protesting, even when all of this was going down, we saw violence. Nothing more obvious than in the March 1965, with the Selma to Montgomery March, the Bloody Sunday, right? And they rode out and they beat people down on horseback, and the armored troops, people, the cops who came in, and the marchers later had to be protected by the National Guard because Johnson, because racism has a long memory. It does. Johnson federalized the Alabama National Guard. He took control of it from Governor Wallace. You know, Governor Wallace, who said segregation today, tomorrow, and forever, that guy. Because he wanted to protect the civil rights marchers, because it wasn't good visual all over the world, especially to our you know, to Russia and everyone else, to see black people being beat down in the street. Black women and children ran down by horses. Right? And so you see people say, well, Johnson did it. He federalized it in 1965. So it's perfectly okay for us to do it now. Johnson did it as a reactive thing because the police, the administration, the state violated the rights of the citizens to peacefully march. That is a difference. He didn't federalize to send troops and people in to stop the marches. He didn't send them in to stop violence. He sent them in to protect those people. And that's why the Edmund Pettus Bridge March is so iconic. And that's why several years ago, when people in the anniversary of it went back to walk across that bridge, and you saw Barack Obama, George Bush, you saw people who had been at the actual march, John Lewis, and they wanted to show you and to make you look back at that history. That's a coming together of America, not a dividing. And today we are stuck with this idea of let's deploy people in to stop protests. The current administration federalized the California Guard and deployed Marines to go in and suppress immigration protests. And tried to say, well, this is like the Selma override. The difference was, it was not to protect the American citizen. It was not to protect free speech. It was designed to stifle it. And so when you use this kind of attack, the same attack that wasn't really used during January 6th when people stormed the nation's capital, you have to look at it from a historical basis and be honest about it. The fact is what the fact is. Federal troops imposing their will on civilians is not something that America, even in the Constitution, cosigns easily. And if you want to look for loopholes, because that's what they were doing, right? These gray areas, these areas where I can kind of move around it, then you're not doing it. That's obsequious, and you're not doing it to please anybody but those people in power who have a xenophobic, racist, bigoted, biased idea of what they want to do. You cannot frame federal actions like that as law and order because you're not following the law. It's not law and order. It's not due process. It's authoritarian. It's totalitarian. It's fascist. And you cannot draw the line back to the civil rights era. You can't. This is what I mean by racists have a long memory. Don't try to play us with the okie doke and say that, well, the reason why we do this is because that's what they did. It's not the same. It's not the same. I tell people that we need to study movement. I've done 3 episodes since the time of Erudition being on, where we talked about the principles of Dr. King and the SCOC and how they went about protests and movement, and how John Lewis talked about movement. Movement should never be violent. It's never violent. It should be something to change the minds of people. And in doing so, you can't do it if you go out there with a rock and start throwing it at the officers and inciting the violence. So what did the LCLC do? What did these other groups do during the civil rights movement? They met together before the marches. It wasn't an impromptu thing. At churches and places. And they said, listen, this is what you will wear. This would indicate that you're a part of the march. It was a way to protect yourself against agent provocateurs. Those people who come into the march only trying to start the violence. The history has shown us not only in America, but throughout the world, who were often paid by the very people who are against the movement. And it was a way to turn something violent. Because once you turn it violent, it loses its moral principle. And you don't need a lot. You don't need a lot of them. You just need people who come with a bag, a go bag, a bag of explosives, a bag of something. And what they do is they go about causing more and more violence. They inflict more violence. The other thing that we got to talk about tonight, and I don't want to waste too much time before we get into it. The other thing we got to talk about tonight is this parade. Historically, the United States has had parades. We've had marches. We've had marches to celebrate victories in war. We've had ticker tape parades for military heroes. But America has always been more reserved in what we do, right? Rather, you talk about the Great White Fleet and how Roosevelt sent out this to showcase American strength. It's always strategic. And historically, it's never really been fascist. We haven't been fascist. We haven't used it to intimidate our citizen. We haven't used it as a way to obsequiously make a person in power feel good about themselves as the leader or their leader. We've had grand reviews. We've had during the Civil War, we've had armies who marched, Black troops who marched through the streets. But it was to show a unity of the country. It was to show that the Union had united with the idea that we are fighting for the end of slavery. We're fighting for the return of these states who've left the Union. We had World War I parades. We had World War II parades. In 1991, we had a Gulf War parade. I don't have a problem with a parade, but it was nonpartisan. It was not about a person's ego or hubris. These parades were done to emphasize that we stand united as a country for the sacrifices that the military folks had made. And it wasn't tied to an individual, a political leader, a political party, some sectarian belief, a partisan. It was none of that. But today, we walk the line. We walk the line. Sean Anthony, historically, due process mostly has been skipped for protests, especially civil rights protests, as a means to protect the good American people from harm, as some would say. Okay. Though that's under extreme cases when people in the wrong are trying to silence or completely destroy the protest or its reason. And we have a lot of people who have this idea, right? That they're right, you're wrong, and that's the way it's going to be. And they are out to undermine the law. And so I do agree with your statement, Sean Anthony. But as I was saying, we walk a line now. If you see the videos of Mussolini or Hitler or Stalin, and you see them standing there with their generals and their political appointees behind them, and they display this authoritarian control over their country and their environment. And it was done by their own admission to deter dissent, to make people feel that you can't argue against the leader. He is the state, he is the power, he is the one, he is the king, he is the worshiper. And so a lot of this America doesn't have a king protest out here were right to do it, to say, wait a minute, that's not what we do. The military is a function. It is something that we utilize, right, to maintain our democracy. It should not be utilized to strip us of our democracy, to make us feel that we are in a military state, that we can't express ourselves. To have the leader of the country say, if you protest, there's going to be a lot of people hurt. And to see people get hurt. Politicians killed in their homes today. The things you say have meaning. You cannot personalize American patriotism by its definition. If you say this is a salute to America, this is to show the resolution of America, but then you focus all the attention on you, your speech, your campaign hats, your VIP people from your party, your people sitting there showing that we are in control of the country. Historically, we call that the cult of personality. And you saw that with Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. And I don't use those things or say those things loosely. It is what it is. When you have politicians praising North Korea and how they do it and how they have their military parade, and it should make you as an American say, wait a minute, that's not what we do. The military is not for your personal use, your personal loyalty. You have tanks, you have jets, you have things flying over American citizens. And you're making them feel like they're watched, held down, and not protected. I remember when I first came in the Navy, I was down in Pensacola, Florida, and a officer, he was a lieutenant commander. The Blue Angels, they practiced down in Pensacola. And I was there, and I was watching them do all of these, technical things in the sky above, court station above the base. And the lieutenant commander walked over to me. I saluted him, and he walked over to me. He said, "You know what that is? You know what that is, sailor?" I said, "Yeah, it's military. They're doing practice and just a general." He said, "No, that's indicative of our freedom, our ability to protect our citizens. But at the same time, when they go out and they do these practices, people all over Florida can see them and know that they're protected." He's like, "I see it as freedom." And he's like, when you go out to other countries and other places in the world where things are restricted, where people fly over and do things to make people feel like they're being watched and controlled, that's not America. That is, for us, that's freedom. And we're changing the narrative of that. We're changing the narrative of that. And it's wrong. And it's done on purpose. And it's typically by people who have no understanding what it means to give service to your country. I saw veterans today willfully be arrested. because they're in their mind, I've fought for this country, I've given for this country. And people who've done nothing feel that they can tell me what it means to be a patriot. I'm not here to make you feel that you don't have a right to choose who you want to vote into office. But I am here to make you understand how things are framed historically. There is a discomfort when we roll military tanks and people into communities and tell them they're there to keep the peace. If you don't think that there's a discomfort, let's go back in time. Let's go look at what Ulysses S. Grant did when he became president of the United States. He sanctioned martial law on parts of the South to protect Black freemen from being lynched, mutilated, and killed during the rise of the Klan. And they effectively destroyed the first Klan. And it wasn't until the compromise of Rutherford B. Hayes and when he came into office and removed those federal troops that things started to fail. And we went back to black codes and Jim Crow and everything else. But here's the catch. The racists who were inflicting the violence and harm on blacks, on former slaves, were angry with the military being deployed in their communities. They were angry and saw it as a violation of their constitutional rights because they felt it was a system of control, which it was. Black troops marching around in uniform, telling us what we can and cannot do. And just so many years ago, they were slaves and property on our fields. That they control us. And there was an anger at the idea of military control. Putting troops in communities. And to this day, right? Civil War revisionists will tell you, right, that this is why they cling to their guns. This is why they believe that the state is always going to come for their guns. They've done it before. But they will still send those same troops and people into your communities to police you, to hold you down. They use it as a symbol and say to themselves that this is patriotism. Let's go further. Alt-right, white nationalist, bigoted groups, they tend to like to use these far right groups, like to take military symbols from around the world, not just America, Nazi symbols, and they like to use them and display them to show that they are the force in charge. They always position themselves with the military. Go back and look at Charlottesville in 2017. Look how many people were in some makeshift uniform, armor, helmets, military gear, imitating military formations. There's an issue right now where we're talking about how there are agendas going on where leadership in this country is trying to get people to come in and look like the military loyalty is loyal to a political loyalty or a political agenda. And what it does is it tells the extremists and the violent and the alt-right and the people that I'm talking about, it empowers them. It endorses them. It makes them say to themselves, you know what? They get it. They're just like us. The military is on our side. We own the military. It's an endorsement. Look at this guy up here standing with Trump in an office who has one of the same symbols and tattoos that I got. That tells me he's with us. That's his silent cue to wink and a nod to let us know he's with us. But when I joined the military, we were told you couldn't be partisan. You shouldn't be up here booing your congressman or senator in uniform. You shouldn't be protesting in uniform. But we're seeing people now take on this demeanor that nope. And then, hold on, when one side does it, the president encourages them to cheer some right agenda. It's okay. It's just them talking to the troops. But if another side does it, wait a minute. Why is that sailor, soldier, Marine, airman, whatever? Why are they protesting? I remember when Obama won the first time, and I was told by a senior military person, don't get too overly excited. It will upset people. That's what I was told. Right? Because that was the identifier to me that wasn't what they agreed to. So don't think that there's not people in the military who co-signed to this. But a majority, I'm going to tell you, majority of the brothers and sisters of people I've met in the military, I always allotted to like a fish tank. You better learn to depend on those who you serve with, regardless of color, regardless of whatever, because that person is responsible. Just like you're responsible for keeping them safe, they're responsible a lot of times for keeping you safe. And so we didn't always sit here with this socio dynamic of, hey, this is my, even though I'm sure we have different political beliefs. I know I've had discussions privately. But when we start allowing politics and sectarian mentalities to get involved in our military, then what we're going to do is we're going to make things start to have a problem within the very people who are supposed to defend us as well as protect themselves, each other. I can't really depend on such because he's shown me. And we've had history of that. During the Vietnam War, I remember sitting down with a Vietnam War veteran, Black Vietnam War veteran, talking to me about how he had to watch out from the boys from the South just as much as he had to watch out for the enemy because they're behind you with guns. We've had these things happen. These are realities that take place in the military. But the way to get around that is, this is why I got mad when the current Secretary of Defense made that statement. It's diversity. An appreciation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Valuing everybody's input, not just one. But when you tell yourself that diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity is the stupidest thing in the military, which is what he said, then you prove yourself to be ignorant, foolish. Because what you're going to prove then is that you want the military to be divisive. Let's go back a little further. If you look at Rome, because a lot of people like to make this connection between America and Rome, and there's some validity to that. But historically, when generals like Sulla or Caesar paraded their legions through Rome, right? The Romans saw it as a precursor to dictatorship. They saw it as them trying to take over Rome, using their generals and their military. It's that whole idea of me being the leader by force. And when you spend millions of dollars amid issues with the economy and everything else, Medicare, veterans care, people being able to afford groceries, civil unrest, but I'm going to show the military on my birthday, no less, and make them understand I am in control. The question of fascism and patriotism. Where are we in America? Are we fusing the military with my own personal ideas? Am I trying to show you my authoritarian power? When I make threats and say bad things will happen if you challenge this. You forget that the Constitution of the United States, our Constitution, indicates that the military is at the service of the people. They're not paraded to you as a threatening thing. They're not a trophy, and they're not a political tool. And when you start doing that, when that line is crossed, we start to fall into fascism. We start to fall into this idea that America has no moral value. It's bigoted. We've seen the bigotry with people being pushed aside, their voices not being heard, folks being put into having no due process. And now we're exploiting militarism. And like Mussolini did, racial nationalism. During the Jim Crow era, this was done too. When they had Confederate parades and Confederate reenactments, and veterans marched around with their Confederates uniforms on. And it is historically factual that it coincided with lynching times in the country. In these cities where bigotry was empowered, it intimidated the Black citizenry, told them that they couldn't vote, let them know that if you stepped out of line, you could be killed and there would be nothing done for you. It enforced control. You see that in you saw that in Russia, you saw that, you see it in China, you saw it in North Korea. It lets the people know who's in charge. Charlottesville, Reunite the Right was one of those big issues. And now some of the same people who were okay with the Reunite the Right were okay with this militarized identity that we saw today throughout the country. I wanted to do a show tonight and give you guys a perspective. I always try to be fair. I've showed you that there are things that we do that are right. There are things that we do that are wrong. And I've given you the reason why they differ. Because they do differ. It's not always about that. Dustin, I see you. Thank you for joining us. We can do better. I completely agree. We can do better. And we must do better. And we must listen to each other. Because if we continue down this path, innocent people are going to get hurt. More innocent people are going to get hurt. And we encourage lunatics on both sides of the aisle, because they are on both sides. That is the truth. But I don't think that we're understanding that. I think what we're doing is a lot of us are gravitating to the divide and not trying to find what could unite us. And that is problematic. And that's going to get a lot of people hurt. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for Erudition tonight. Those of you did for the live session, I do appreciate you. I see there's a couple of people that were in and out, but I appreciate you all being here. I know we usually try to do these shows on Thursday. I haven't been able to do that due to a lot of different things going on, but I definitely appreciate you, and I want you to continue to share, and support the Erudition Network. Help us as we grow and as we provide more and more information out here for folks. I did not put the banner on. I apologize. So the banner is right here. We do have Cash App. If you want to help out the Erudition Network for anything that we do, as far as the equipment and everything that we get, how we are able to present things to you or present things to the world socially, you can do that. Whatever you do is appreciated. Additionally, I want you, if you can't financially do anything, that's not the most important thing. Share, grow the network, send it to someone, invite them, have them to come on when we do the interactives or when Tina does her show on Monday for Adroit Living to talk about mental health and awareness. Join us, talk to us, come on here, put your thoughts down, and we can discuss these things openly. That's what this is about. That's what this is for. And we encourage you to do so. All right, I'm gonna get on out of here. I've taken a lot of y'all time this evening. I know it's late in the area in the evening for a lot of you all. It's 9 o'clock here for me, but I wanted to make sure I did a show today because I was not on last week, and I wanted to make sure that we could connect with some of you. But I'm going to get on out of here. I hope you have a blessed rest of your weekend and a good Father's Day for all the fathers out there. Happy Father's Day to you. And we will hopefully see you, God willing, next week. You all be blessed. Thank you. Thank you.